Greetings, my name is George Falconer and this is Peniel. Some time ago I wrote a book which tells my life story about how I was converted and joined Operation Mobilisation. This is it, God's Kaleidoscope by George Falconer. And you can see that it was endorsed by George Verwer, who was the founder of Operation Mobilisation. If I may just dip into it, a date for my interviews was fixed. I had to travel to Shropshire, but during that period that I had to go there, the railway was having intermittent one-day strikes. I did not want to find that they were on strike on the day that I needed to travel, so I informed OM by phone that I would come by coach. The woman I spoke to said that she would be at the coach station to meet me upon arrival, but when I got to Wrexham, the woman was not there. And if you want to find out what happened, get my book, God's Kaleidoscope by George Falconer. I'm going to read the second chapter of Habakkuk, and hopefully we shall learn from it. I will stand at my guard post. I will station myself on the wall. I will watch to see what he will say to me and what answer I will get to my complaints. Now that refers to the contents of the first chapter, where Habakkuk is dismayed and disgusted at all the injustice he sees, and God doesn't seem to be doing anything about it. But nevertheless, he's confident that God will answer in his own time. And so Habakkuk decides that he will be at his post and he will wait and see. And that's a lesson for us. We need to wait and see, to wait upon the Lord, to wait for answers to our prayer, and God will answer in due course. He may not answer in the way that we imagine, and he certainly didn't answer in the way that Habakkuk would have imagined, as we will go on to see in this chapter. But nevertheless, we should expect answers. Even if the answer's no, if we make a request, I can look back on things that I prayed for and asked God for, and I'm glad that I didn't get them, because if I had, it would have been a disaster. On the other hand, I can also think of other things that I asked God for and God answered, but not in the short space of time I wanted. I had to wait. And when he did answer, he gave me more than I asked for. So God is gracious and good and answers prayer. And it is a great privilege to us that he listens to our prayer. Remember, he is a holy God. We don't have automatic rights, and he's certainly not a genie to do what we want. I think that some people think that words are a formula to make God do what we want, but that's not how it works. We have to do God's will. It is God who owns us, not the other way around. And we have to submit to God, submit to his will, and do as he commands. And Habakkuk was looking for that. And the answer, I'm sure, would have shocked and surprised him. It then goes on to say, "Then the Lord answered me, write the vision, make it clear on tablets so that anyone can read it quickly." Write on tablets. In those days, of course, they didn't have publications for everyone to look at, but the tablets would be something that people could look at and read and be astonished at the vision that God had revealed to Habakkuk, and hopefully get them prepared for what was to come, because God was going to answer that prayer and many of them would be humiliated or even die in the answer that God was going to give. So I hope that many of them submitted to God's will personally. The vision will still happen at the appointed time. It hurries towards its goal. It won't be a lie. If it's delayed, wait for it. It will certainly happen. It won't be late. So you've got this contrast between the vision hurrying and also being delayed. So God's saying, wait the time. You don't know when it's going to happen, but I do. But it will happen at the appointed time. And whatever the appointed time was, it wouldn't go beyond that. And that's the same with all of God's dealings with us. It will happen at the time God has appointed, and we don't necessarily know what the appointed time is. We need to be patient. We need to trust in the Lord for the things that we ask him for. And like Habakkuk, we can see all sorts of things going on around us that are injustices, and we may be praying about them and wondering, what is God going to do about it? God will do something, but he'll do it in the time that he has appointed, and not according to our will, but according to his will. Look at the proud person. He is not right in himself, but the righteous person will live because of his faithfulness. We need to be faithful to God. We need to be working at our righteousness and submitting to God's will in order that we might be pleasing to God and that we might live too from a spiritual point of view. Also, because wine is treacherous, he is arrogant and never rests. He has a large appetite like the grave. He is like death, never satisfied. He gathers all the nations to himself and collects all the people to himself. Won't all of them ridicule him, directing clever sayings and riddles at him, like, how horrible it would be for the one who makes himself rich with what is not his own and makes himself wealthy on loans, getting into huge amount of debt and appearing to be wealthier than you are is foolish. And calling all the nations to yourself like a king does, or like the leaders of the nation were at the time. And it's foolish, because God will call everyone to account. How long will this go on? God is, in fact, putting back to Habakkuk the question he was asking. How long will this go on? You can sense how frustrated and tired Habakkuk must have been. He wanted to see things done rightly. And he would have been in a minority at the time. Remember, the world is not for you, it is against you. And Habakkuk would have found that. Won't your creditors suddenly rise up, and those who are going to shake you wake you up? Then you will become their prize. You have looted many nations, as indeed they must have done. And sooner or later it will all come back at you. Of course, this is political things he's talking about, but it's true of us as individuals as well. There are consequences to our actions, so we need to be wise in everything that we do, and we should ask God for wisdom and trust that he gives it to us. But remember, there are consequences, and even the consequences are good for you, because if you submit to the consequences, at least you will learn from your mistakes. All the rest of the people will loot you because of the slaughter and violence done to lands, cities, and all their inhabitants. You will be looted, is what God is saying to Habakkuk. Other nations will rise up against you and conquer you. And that would have seemed terrible to Habakkuk. And he probably wouldn't have been able to see it without God's revealed will, because they would have appeared as Judah to be strong. God can soon cut the foundation from under you, cut your feet away, as he did. And nations did rise up against him and conquer them. How horrible it would be for the one who uses violence to get things for his own household in order to set up his nest on high and save himself from disaster. Pointless. Trying to save yourself from the disaster that God has decreed is going to happen. Pointless. You have planned disgrace for your household by cutting off many people and forfeiting your own life. A stone in the wall will cry out. A beam in the roof will answer it. Inanimate objects will by their very nature speak to you. The very stones, the very rafters will speak of your defeat. How horrible it would be for the one who builds a city by slaughter and founds a town by crime. Isn't it from the Lord of armies? The people grow tired only to feed the flames, and nations exhaust themselves for nothing. And we've seen that down through history, that nations come and nations go and they're conquered. And they do things for all sorts of reasons. There's never just the one reason. They do it for all sorts of mixed reasons. Conquering other nations, or being terribly proud of themselves, or committing terrible crimes. But God is a God of holiness and a God of justice. And his holiness and his justice at some point will come to the fore, and God's will be carried out. In fact, God's will is always being carried out. Whatever happens, even if it seems to be bad, is something he has allowed. And all the good things that happen are also him too. But everything works together for the good of the Lord's will. But the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord's glory, like the water covers the sea. Isn't that glorious? The whole earth will know about God's glory. Everyone will know about it. Of course, some people will be disgraced when it happens. One day Christ will return, for instance, so be warned. But he's saying to Habakkuk that the whole nation, everyone of his day, will know about the glory of God when the two things, the disasters come that God has warned him is going to happen. You are filled with disgrace rather than glory. Drink, yes, you, and expose yourself as godless. The cup in the Lord's right hand will come around to you, and disgrace will cover your glory. So again, the Lord is warning time and time again about the disaster that is coming to the nation. And I wonder what people would have thought of Habakkuk chiseling away these tablets. Did they blame him? Or did they have a good look in the mirror and blame themselves for what was going to happen, because it was happening because of their own actions? The violence done to Lebanon will overwhelm you, and the destruction done to the animals will terrify you. because of the slaughter and violence done to lands, cities, and all their inhabitants. So the violence is coming. The war is coming, as God is repeatedly saying to Habakkuk. And I'm sure Habakkuk must have dreaded that. Certainly the nation, if they were paying attention to the Lord, would dread it. What benefit is there in a carved idol when its maker has carved it? What benefit is there in a moulded statue, a teacher of lies, when its maker has moulded it? The one who formed it trusts himself to make worthless idols that cannot speak. They were making their own gods and worshipping them. How foolish could you be? But you know, that's what we do. We worship ourselves. We are often our own gods. We trust in our own actions, our own understanding, and worship ourselves. So we are just as foolish as them. They just did it in a different way. They carved idols that couldn't speak and couldn't do anything and worship them, that I believe we worship ourselves. And so that's pointless. How horrible it would be for the one who says to a piece of wood, "Wake up," and to a stone that cannot talk, "Get up." Can that thing teach anyone? Just look at it. It is covered with gold and silver, but there's absolutely no life in it. The Lord is in his holy temple. All the earth should be silent in his presence, as indeed they are. God's will would be carried out no matter what. We see in this chapter that Habakkuk hates injustice, and you can almost sense his impatience with God, saying, "When are you going to do something, God?" And that's what the contrast is, saying it will come quickly, but if it's late, then it's not too late. And he's really saying to Habakkuk, you be patient and watch this. He was to write the vision on a tablet for everyone to see, so they had no excuses. They could all read it and be warned. And if they'd been wise, they would have repented, but they didn't. The vision would happen at the appropriate time that God had appointed. The vision was fulfilled. The Babylonian Empire, the Chaldeans, were used of God to punish the wickedness of Judah. That's a reference back to all the terrible things that Judah was doing in chapter 1. And the Babylonian Empire came and conquered them. And we should expect to see that God carries out his will in our day as well. I'm sure Judah must have thought they were unassailable, but the Babylonians were used of God. And the Babylonians were not a terribly nice nation. They were absolutely disgusting. They also conquered and destroyed. But God sometimes uses instruments that we don't expect to be used to carry out his will. And I'm sure that Habakkuk and all those in Judah wouldn't have expected God to use the Babylonians. How could he use these disgraceful people, that awful empire, to carry out his will? But he did. Then the Babylonians' own destruction is in the vision, because they were crushed by the Medo-Persian Empire in about 539 BC. So the two things are predicted, prophesied by God. The Babylonians will come and conquer you, and then the Medo-Persian Empire will come and conquer the Babylonians. Habakkuk describes the Babylonians as a bitter and hasty nation, and they were terribly bitter. but still used of God. They wouldn't have known they were being used of God, but in providence they were. And we shouldn't be astonished at the things that God does in our day. We might understand it, but we do have to trust in the Lord and know that God is carrying out his will. And the core message, if we're to take one thing from this, it's this: the righteous will live by faith. We're not righteous in ourselves, but if we trust in the Lord, if we trust in Jesus Christ, he gives us righteousness. And that's how we are to live, trusting in the Lord in all circumstances, because he is sovereign, not us, not me, not you. The Lord is sovereign. And remember that, and trust in him every day, and ask him to do his will. Remember, in the Lord's Prayer, we are told we are to pray, your kingdom come. It's God's kingdom that we are involved with. We have to be part of it, and that we are being used of God to build his kingdom, not our own. And Habakkuk would have been astonished at what God revealed to him. Amen. And we look forward to chapter 3.